Loving Eliza by Ruth Nordin, Chapter 13. John had hoped that Eliza would be back at his place when he returned. The first thing he did was check the little home that he'd given her to stay in. But it was empty. He stood in the doorway, unsure of what to do. He had looked all over town for her, starting with Frank and Addie's place, and then the boarding house, before he finally made his way to Charity's home. He couldn't think of anywhere else she might stay. While he was at Charity's, he tried to ask a marshal to search for her, but the man shooed him away as if he were a child. When John grabbed the marshal by the shirt collar, Daphne intervened, and after a good 15 minutes of trying to write down what he wanted, she finally translated it to the big oaf, who, at long last, left the house to notify everyone in town that he was looking for Eliza. John had also taken the time to tell Daphne that since she had been delayed, he had gotten to know Eliza and that he wanted to marry her instead. He apologized and hoped that Daphne would soon find one of the other single men in town who were more to her liking. Daphne had said that she understood, and Charity started making plans on which available bachelor would be the best pick to go after. John took his time in returning home. The sun was setting, which made it hard for him to examine the landscape. Perhaps Eliza had decided to leave town altogether. But where would she go? There wasn't anything around them for miles. He heard a noise. Hoping it might be Eliza, he turned around, but he only saw a deer leap out of sight. He lowered a lantern and lumbered to his house. The absence of Eliza's chitter-chatter was deafening. He'd been used to silence before she came, but once she made her home here, he'd had the pleasure of her voice. Whether she was talking or singing, she had delighted him with her presence. And now she was gone. Just where did she go? He swallowed a lump in his throat and blinked back his tears. He didn't want to cry. Crying didn't solve anything. He needed solutions. He needed information. He needed to act. But what else could he do? He had already exhausted all of his ideas. Entering the house, he set the lantern on the kitchen table and sat down. He took a moment to look at the yellow walls. She enjoyed the color yellow. His gaze drifted to the wilting yellow flowers at the center of the table. Flowers didn't last long once they were plucked from the ground. But there were so many on the property, she could pick a dozen each day and still have more to choose from. Now she wouldn't be picking flowers, and that made the place seem emptier as well. He shouldn't have run from her. He should have stayed. It was his fault that she left. She had told him a part of her past that he hadn't wanted to hear, and he had run away from her. He put his face in his hands and took a deep breath, fighting off the tears. No, don't cry. Crying won't solve anything. In many ways, crying was admitting defeat. People cried when things were hopeless. But this couldn't be hopeless. Once Eliza found out that he was no longer engaged to Daphne, she would understand how much she meant to him. Then she would come back. He couldn't marry Daphne. If he did, he would always be wishing that he had married Eliza instead. Then he would be doing wrong by Daphne. And what woman wanted to be married to a man who secretly loved another? He sighed. No, if he couldn't marry Eliza, he didn't want to be married at all. Eliza sat up and straightened her back. The late morning sunlight struck her eyes and made her wince. She lowered her head and wiped the sweat off her brow. The kitchen floor was almost clean now. She leaned forward on her knees and dipped the rag into the soapy water and wrung out the dirt. Harriet Lube had needed someone to clean her house in the worst possible way. As tired as Eliza was, she was satisfied that she was doing honest work she could be proud of, and that counted for something. She placed the rag back on the floor and scrubbed the grime up from the wooden surface. Several strands of her hair fell into her mouth. She tried to spit them out, but the strands were resistant things, so she threw the rag down and forced the rebellious hair back into the bun. She would have to wear a braid tomorrow. Girl! Eliza glanced up as Harriet used her cane to help her limp across the floor. Yes, Mrs. Lube? Eliza sat up and placed the rag in the bucket. After you're done here, I need you to go into the attic and clear it out. I'm not getting any younger, and it's time I threw some things away. Yes, Mrs. Lube. I'll need you to haul all that junk out to the garbage heap, out past 3rd Road. Where do I get a wagon to carry everything? Eliza asked. Well, I don't know. That's not my problem, Harriet said. Do you know someone who can loan me one? Girl, I hired you to figure out that kind of thing. Now, I gotta get something to eat. Food. Eliza's stomach grumbled, reminding her that she hadn't had supper the previous night or breakfast that morning. And may I make it for you? I can cook. I'm not paying you to eat, Harriet said. I'm paying you to work. Eliza clenched her skirt so she wouldn't snap at her employer. She needed the money. The woman promised her $5 a week. That would be enough for rent and food. If Eliza was careful, she could buy clothes and other necessary items as the need for them arose. She waited for a moment to calm down before she spoke. I haven't had anything to eat since yesterday afternoon. Couldn't I grab a quick bite? I'll even make the meal. The woman frowned. I'm being generous with the money I'm going to pay you at the end of the week, aren't I? Well, yes, ma'am, and I appreciate it. But I can't do my job if I'm hungry. Then go and eat. While you're taking the things from the attic to the garbage heap, stop by Rhoda's restaurant. Harriet shuffled over to the table in front of the window and took a loaf of bread out of her bread box. Now, when you go out to eat, don't take any more than 20 minutes, and that will be once a day. Eliza knew it was pointless to argue with someone, so she turned back to her work and continued scrubbing the floor, while Harriet made a large sandwich and ate it right in front of her. Eliza's mouth watered, and her stomach rumbled to the point of pain, but she pressed on in the task. Finally, when she was done, she jumped out the bucket of dirty water and went up to the attic, which was full of cobwebs and junk that hadn't seen the light of day in well over 10 years. She sat down for a moment and closed her eyes. She was hungry, and her employer had just told her that she had to take away some of this junk in order to eat. But she had to find a wagon first. Maybe she could slip into the restaurant as she looked for the wagon. Harriet didn't have to know. Eliza decided on that plan and climbed down a ladder and then went down the steps of the 1st floor where Harriet had nodded off to sleep. Good. She could just do her task and not worry about upsetting the old bat. Eliza realized it wasn't a Christian thing to do, thinking poorly about another human being. But she couldn't deny that she did not like this woman. From the moment she'd met her, Harriet Lube struck her as a crotchety woman who had nothing better to do than sulk in her own state of misery. Miserable people often made others miserable. Life had taught her that, and that was why Eliza vowed that no matter what, she would not fall into that trap. Despite her circumstances, she would be pleasant to others. She slipped into the restaurant and saw Addie talking to Cynthia Taggart. As soon as Addie saw her, she waved to her. Glad to see a friendly face, Eliza rushed over to the table and sat down. She glanced at the clock. She would have to be careful to keep her time to 20 minutes. You had me worried, Addie said, clasping her hand. Eliza blinked. Why? Well, don't you know? Cynthia stood up. I'll leave you two to talk. I'll see you both at the church. Eliza smiled and nodded as the woman left. Turning her attention back to Addie, she asked, What is it? What don't I know? Well, that John's been looking all over for you. Eliza shifted uncomfortably in her chair. Yes, I thought it best if I stopped working for him. Miss O'Connor will be out there soon enough, and the last thing they need is for me to interfere. Oh, then you don't know. Know what? Rhoda left a table of laughing men and came over to them. Good day. What can I get you two to eat? Addie glanced up. I'd like the ravioli. I'll have the same, Eliza said, not really caring what she ate, as long as it was edible. She couldn't wait until the food arrived. Just the smell coming from the kitchen made her weak. Once Rhoda left, Addie said, John broke off the engagement. Eliza gasped. What? But why? Addie smiled. Isn't it obvious? Eliza's face flushed. She hoped it wasn't because of her. Isn't what obvious? Well, he loves you. I could tell that when I saw you in church together. Rhoda set 2 cups of coffee in front of them. Thank you, Addie said, picking up her cup and taking a sip. Ooh, it's still hot. She quickly put it down. Eliza felt sick to her stomach. Why would he go and do something so foolish? Did he think she was lying about being a prostitute? It had hurt to tell him. She knew that he had thought of her as a lady, and he had certainly treated her like one. But she'd had no choice. Still, he couldn't give up the chance to be with Daphne. If he did, Eliza would never forgive herself. He promised Daphne that he would marry her, Eliza finally said, and took a cup in her hands. Maybe, but she didn't show up and you did. It seems to me that God had other plans in mind. Eliza gave a bitter laugh. God didn't plan that one, I assure you of that. She took a sip of the coffee, despite the fact that it was, indeed, hot. She needed something to occupy her mouth, and it felt good to drink something. Harriet had allowed her 1 glass of water when she arrived at her house that morning, but that had been it. God works in mysterious ways, Addie said with a grin. Eliza breathed a sigh of relief as Rhoda placed a plate of ravioli in front of her. She eagerly grabbed her fork and dug into the meal. As soon as she realized how unsophisticated she must look, she forced herself to slow down. Where are you staying? Addie asked as she bit into her food. Eliza brought the fork to her mouth. I'm at Molly's boarding house. Then she ate the ravioli. Cheese had never tasted so good. John went there. He must have been there before you arrived. Eliza, can you afford a boarding house? Yes, I got a job that pays well. I'm doing fine. Well, that's good, Addie said. You do know that if there's anything you need, you can come to me. Eliza ate another bite of ravioli and smiled. Thank you, Addie, but I'm doing fine. I came here to be on my own, and now I'm doing it. Addie nodded. Oh, I need to ask you something, Eliza said. Do you know anyone who has a wagon that I can borrow? Well, sure I do. Frank has one. He needs it for the store. Do you need someone to drive it? Eliza hadn't thought about driving it. I should. I'm not familiar with horses. Well, if Frank is unavailable, then you can go to Willie. You've met Willie, haven't you? Yes, he's a nice man, Eliza replied. Very nice, Addie agreed. Willie's the kind of person who'll do anything for anyone in need. Thank you, Addie. I'll remember that. After Eliza was finished eating, she went to Frank and asked to use his wagon. When she realized that Frank had to stay at the store, she went to Willie's house. As she was about to knock on the door, Troy called out to her. She quickly knocked and turned to him. Willie would open the door soon, and she'd feel better. She didn't know what it was about Troy that bothered her, but she felt it best to limit their conversations. How are you doing? Troy asked her. Good, she said. You managing all right? Yes, I'm doing fine, thanks. Where was Willie? Well, I'm glad to hear that, Troy said. The door opened, and she said a silent prayer of thanks for the interruption. Hello, Mr. Jafferty, she greeted. Hello, Miss Sweet. Mr. Evans, the man replied, straightening his shirt. How may I help you? I was just over at Mr. Garrison's store, and he said that I could borrow his wagon, but I've never driven one before, so I was wondering if you could help me out with that. I need to empty out Mrs. Lube's attic, and she wants her things taken to the garbage, Eliza explained. Well, I'd be happy to help you, Willie said. Let me get my hat and vest, and I'll be right back. Thank you. Troy smiled. You know, I have a wagon, too. Should you ever need one in the future, and if Willie's not able to help, I'd like to offer my services. I'll keep that in mind, and it's nice of you to offer. She prayed that she would never have to take him up on that. To her surprise, the marshal walked over to them. Thank goodness I finally found you, Miss Sweet. Her eyes widened. Did Harriet send the marshal to look for her? Is there a problem, Marshal? No, the marshal began, but at least Miss O'Connor can rest assured that you're safe. That John came by last night and insisted that I do a search for you. Never mind that you're an adult woman who is fully capable of leaving him if you wish. Quite frankly, I don't know why you agreed to work for him in the first place. But that's just me. Anyway, now I can tell Miss O'Connor that I found you." "Miss Sweet is staying at Molly's," Joyce said on her behalf. "Well, that's a good choice," the marshal replied. "Molly's a nice woman. She'll do you right. That'll make Mrs. O'Connor feel even better, which means that my wife will feel better too." Eliza wondered if she should have left John a note. Then he wouldn't have worried other people. Oh well, there was nothing to be done about it now. Hopefully, things would settle down, and he would rethink breaking off the engagement with Daphne. She could only hope that he would do that, even if a part of her dreaded it. As the marshal headed off, Willie asked, "Why did you leave John's place?" Was it really any of his business? Or anyone's business? But Willie had been kind to John, one of the few people in town who had actually been nice to him. So he deserved her respect. "I left because Miss O'Connor's in town now," Eliza explained, "and I know that a woman doesn't want to share her space with another woman, even if that other woman is the help." "I'm sorry you had to leave," Willie said. "John's a good man, and I'm sure that he's better than Mrs. Lube. That woman's a hard one to deal with." "Is she?" Here it came. What he would say next would only confirm her fears. "Well, she's got to be," Willie said. "No one's worked for her for so long. I think the longest anyone's worked for her was half a year." Troy shrugged and crossed his arms. "That doesn't matter. I'm sure Eliza can find a man who'd be more than happy to marry her. Then she won't have to deal with Mrs. Lube or any other job." This wasn't going well. She didn't have the desire to marry Troy. Willie closed the door. "Anyway, I best get you over to Mrs. Lube's before she starts screaming." "Oh, you're jesting. She won't really scream," Eliza said, with a grin. He raised an eyebrow. "I've seen it before. She had that Marcia crying that one time. I'll never forget how afraid of Mrs. Lube she was after that." "Then Marcia married Stephen and she's fine now," Troy interjected. "True," Willie agreed. "Stephen's a good man. He treats her well, too." Eliza sighed. "Well, I'd better get back to work then. Will you take the wagon over there? I'll start clearing up her attic." "I'll help too," Troy offered. "I got the rest of the day off and have nothing to do." Troy, with her all afternoon? Eliza quickly looked over at Willie. "Will you help too?" "Sure I will," Willie said. "Any friend of John's is a friend of mine, and I believe in helping my friends whenever I can." Troy seemed disappointed, but Eliza didn't care. She liked Willie and was relieved that he would be there. "I'm fortunate to have the help of two strong men." They both beamed at her, so she left it at that. She just hoped that none of them got the wrong idea about this.